Hello, everybody, and welcome to Asha USA's speaker series. Today, we are going to talk to a special person. As you know, Asha USA is a nonprofit organization in Minnesota, and the mission is health and harmony in the South Asian community. As a part of Asha USA's various initiatives, one of our groups is a senior monthly group where seniors in the community meet once a month, and they have formed bonds over a number of years. We have people who have lived here for many years and who have grown children and are spending their senior years here. We also have people in the group who come from India and other parts of the world to visit their kids here. I happened to meet one such interesting person in our recent hum meet. Her name is Sunita Chandla. Did I say that correctly?
Chandla, yes,
Chandla.
absolutely.
And and let's talk to her. It was very interesting to hear what she has done, the various fields that she has worked in. So much to learn from her. So welcome, Sunita ji, and thank you for chatting with us.
Thank you, Sayali. Thank you so much for inviting me over here on such an esteemed platform. And well,
yeah, we'd like to start by learning more about you. Can you tell us a little bit about, your background, what your educational background, your work background, things like that?
Sure. So I am an Indian and of course live in India. And over here, I visit my daughter and son-in-law in Minneapolis. And it's a pleasure to come here. Now, about my background, well, I was born there and I got educated over there. And after my schooling, I did my college and I did a college degree in tourism. I'm a tourism graduate from Delhi University.
Wow, yeah, so that's a very unique field.
It is indeed. It is indeed, and pretty glamorous. And this is what I must have thought and dreamed about. And God has been kind that I really did get to travel a lot. And to begin with, India, with such, diversity that we have and beautiful destinations. And I was very sure that one needed to travel places around India before I went abroad. And that's what happened. And I loved all the places that I went to. And I got married pretty young. And I lived a decade in Shimla. And then I came to Delhi and I started working. So I started my career as a teacher. With young children, you always prefer, less hours so that you can coordinate the hours that they go to school and you are in your own productive hours at school and come back at the same time to be able to spend time with them. So I started my career with teaching. I taught in a couple of schools and my training was from Aurobindo ashram. Sri Aurobindo, as you know, was a great philosopher and a teacher, a freedom fighter too. And I went all the way to Pondicherry to get my teacher's training. And that gave me a very different dimension in life. And somehow it turned me into a very unconventional teacher, where I felt that kids needed a more playway method and not very conventional ways to teach. And so I became the nursery. I was head of the nursery department too. and got an award also for the best nursery teacher with my, creations. Then I moved on to work as a news monitor uh, in the monitoring station of India, uh, where we scanned the international skies like BBC, CNN, Voice of Iran, Voice of America. And it was very interesting because, we had to take down news, what we heard on our, headphones, and we had to transcribe the news verbatim. Now, I was listening to different accents. Voice of America was so different than British.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty confusing because they said the same words in a very different way. And I, being an Indian, I was used to a very different accent in my own environment. And that's when, my journey started of teaching accents or neutralizing the accent, because first I had to learn them.
Mm-hmm. So I have a curious question. So this change from being a teacher in a nursery setting or being a principal of a nursery school to being in this news monitoring area, that job, how did you make that leap? How did you get because they're not very related fields, right?
Yes. Yeah, probably they are not, but there are certain things that, destiny takes you there, and God wills it that way. And sometimes he paves the path for you and he shows the journey. So it was a time gap where, I had left the school job because I was visiting the US, my sister over here. And back then, I remember this that 9/11 thing happened, and then uh, the flights were not available, and I could not go back to the same school on time. So, since there was an unusual gap, so it was considered as almost, leaving the school. I could not really reach back on time. And then in the time gap, I still wanted to do something. And then I chanced upon this monitoring station where I became a news monitor and was doing this. And as they say, no education goes waste, no
Yeah.
learning goes waste. So when I was doing all of this, and I remember I used to keep a dictionary in my hand all the time because I had to really see what it means, because, the words were said in very different tones and different pronunciations. And, but I knew that a language ought to be spoken the right way. Now, English being the British language, so it had to be spoken the right way. And then I got to know the nuances of how the Americans change it. They would, for plant, which is an English word, they would say plant. So I know how they slanted their A's, and this is how they made it very different. And but I had to remain, neutral to be able to understand. And just then, this was way back in 2000 when the BPO industry in India was mushrooming up, and I got a chance to work over there. And in fact, there was a time where my daughter and I worked in the same company, while she worked at the quality department, and I was towing the same line as teaching. So I joined the training department. And then I was training the newcomers for neutralizing their accents. And
so you were training, were these journalists or who were these people you were training?
No, at that time they were not journalists. They could be engineers. They could be, because they were doing the job for, say, they were supporting technology from India, or they were the sales people, or they were the customer service people. So I remember back then we got trained by the Americans, or the British would come to tell us about their own peculiarities in their own languages. So I was lucky to even uh, get
Learn.
trained by them as well.
Yeah, yeah. So, what are some of the things? Because it is very interesting, and this comes up a lot, especially, people who are here from other countries. We all speak English in a different way. The accents are different. The language is different. The way words are used is different. The way phrases are used is different. So, what are some of the things that you can tell us about, especially when it comes to British English that we speak in India versus American English? Uh, any funny instances or anything you would like to share?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So, see, anyone who talks well is usually music to ears, right? And with their good speaking, they take us to their own world of imagination, or a story. Um, s- and when the whole purpose of speaking is to convey a message, to
Hmm.
convey something, or to convey your own feelings.
Hmm.
And then when it is spoken in a warped or a twisted manner, it sometimes become very funny, and
Hmm.
sometimes it can also sidetrack the audience, because when the words are spoken in a different way, it can change the meaning entirely. Say, for example, um, but before that, let me tell you that each language, be it Chinese, English, or South Indian, Gujarati, every language has its own speech music. And
Hmm.
however we speak, we our we put the words in the same rhythm. So a Chinese, when he starts to speak, would still sound Chinese, though he may be speaking English.
Hmm. Yeah.
And Punjabis, when they speak English, it could sound more like Punjabi, or South
Right.
Indian for that matter.
Right. Yeah.
Now, so that's the premise, actually, because the way we enunciate words, the way we say words, there are certain words, not really words, but sounds that are peculiar to a language.
Hmm.
For example, our people from Kashmir, they usually cannot say "r." They would say for bread, they would say bread. They would not say bread, they would say bread. And the way we say D also is very, very different, like doctor or doctor. There's a
Hmm.
difference.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
what I got to know and got to understand is the way we enunciate the words within the mouth. There is a special way. So, when I teach my students, I can tell them that, this is how, or this is where your tongue can touch or cannot touch to produce the right sound.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
For example, a lot of people have, and this is very peculiar from, people from India. They flip their sounds from j to z.
Hmm.
So just the other day, somebody was saying that, well, this has to be based on a reason, and it didn't quite make sense. And then we started talking a little more. What he meant was that it is based on a region.
Oh, okay.
Now, see, so by the time you're still processing somebody's words and understanding what is he trying to say, relating
Hmm.
to the context, it
Hmm.
changes. And then you lose that flow of listening, and then you get distracted. And then probably you're not interested in probably understanding or, talking any further because
Right.
you've lost it,
Right.
that kind of a thing. Now,
Yeah.
even in, so these are, of course, certain letters or whatever, or sometimes even the connotation of words is also very different. For example, um, when you have someone over, you've invited someone for a meal, and you want to know, how did you like this dish? And the Americans over here, even if they don't like it, they would say, it was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And here, the Indian is with all smiles, to say, oh, wow, probably he really loved the dish. But
Yeah.
no, that's not true. The connotation is different. Interesting means it was a little weird. And I know they're very polite with their words, so they would say it was interesting. So by and by, you get to know. So languages can be very complex. One
Yeah.
with their, the exact meaning and the connotations can be different. What you really infer from it is different from what is said.
Mm-hmm.
You read
Yeah.
between the lines as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Even the way we use the same word can be different in different areas of the world. So I remember when I came here for the first time from India, and I was in graduate school, and back home we say a batch of students, right? We say a batch of students. So in my batch we had so and so, whereas here uh, they don't say that. They say cohort or class or something. So I remember first, my first exposure here, I was talking to a friend, a group of friends actually at the university, and I was telling them something about back home, that in my batch I had so and so, and they first looked at each other, looked at me, and they didn't understand what I was trying to say. And
Exactly.
when I explained to them, they all burst laughing because they said, here, batch means a batch of cookies, right? A batch of things. And
Exactly.
I still remember I was so embarrassed, but then it was not, I was not saying, I was not ignorant. It's just that I didn't know that this
Correct.
word is not used in this
Of
context.
course. Of
Yeah.
course. As I initially said that, the main purpose of speaking is, to convey a message, and we do get it. But it becomes a little odd when you're trying to say something very serious, or you're on a, a formal setting where you're on the stage and you're trying to deliver a piece of information or message. And there, when we, especially when we try to mix words, it becomes a silly mix. For example, I've heard uh, a word called schedule. Now, schedule is a very silly mix. Either
Mm-hmm.
you say schedule, which
Yeah.
is British, or the way Americans would say it is, what's your schedule?
Yeah.
So it's different. You cannot mix the two and say schedule. So that sounds very, very odd. And in things like what is in the desert or dessert.
Yeah. Yeah.
So desert is, you can have the other person get so perplexed. What
Right.
is someone trying to say, because he understands both the words. So
Yeah.
like that, you can really. And so what I figured out is that there is a particular system that this can be taught, and there is um, and this can be learned very logically, and it's a great thing to learn that, because whatever we may speak, it's our responsibility to express well, to
Mm-hmm.
become comprehensive, to reach a larger audience, and to make sense of what we say.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And our kids who are growing up here, we parents have so many instances where they learn American English growing up, and we are talking to them in our own British Indian English, and there are a lot of examples where they either laugh at us or they correct us or they are confused as to what we are trying to say. So yeah, so it's been an interesting journey.
So this
uh
is why I say, because merely copying will not do the work.
no.
So when I teach, I have to tell them that how do you enunciate a word? How is that sound produced? Like in Hindi, we call it uchcharan. So there are different, and our Hindi language is very, very scientific. It's very logical. The alphabet is based on the way we say that, from ka, kha, ga, gha, na is all said with a particular, and cha has cha, cha, ja, the same part of the tongue touches the teeth. So
Yeah.
it's in that order, but not English. English can be very, very difficult because so unless one learns all of that, it becomes very difficult to just depend on the hearsay. Whatever you hear, you kind of just copy it, and you may copy it wrong.
Yeah. So you told us about why it is important to be aware of the differences in how different people pronounce the English language. So are you still teaching, or what is it that you're doing
Oh,
now?
yes, I do.
Next.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I do. I do teach online, and I help people neutralize, their English. I teach Hindi as well to kids over here because, like my own granddaughter, she is learning Hindi, and now she can write Hindi, her name, and read a few sentences here and there. It's important for us to keep with our own language and culture.
Yeah, definitely.
I do teach that. Yes.
Yeah. And now that we have become a global world, especially through social media, I think it's becoming more and more important that in order to understand each other, we need to be aware of these.
Absolutely. And see, otherwise, the credibility can be compromised. So it's not really, how good you're going to sound, but how credible also. So yeah, the credibility also can be compromised if we do not speak very well.
So does this training of yours or this passion of yours help you when you are traveling? Or,
yes,
any
absolutely. So while we get used to, our kind of accent in our own environment, so sometimes it becomes a little daunting to hear a different accent. Like my own grandchildren who are in London, they speak very different from how my granddaughter over here speaks. And it becomes a little difficult to understand. But having understood the nuances of the British accent, one can fairly understand, and I can understand it better than other people. Probably my spouse sometimes. So it helps. It helps. It helps.
That's really wonderful. We always talk about how grandkids and grandparents have a hard time sometimes communicating with each other.
Exactly. And they would feel very embarrassed.
Yeah. But you are at an advantage because you can understand all of those different accents. So
and I want to tell you that it's a skill that can be learned at any age, because there is a system, and it's not very difficult, and you find it interesting. And then I also tell my students or whoever, I said, with this system you can become dictionary perfect, you will become independent, and that's my USP. This is what I say.
Yeah, no, that's very
guarantee. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was such interesting information, and the kind of work you do is very, very interesting and has an impact. So thank you so much for talking to us today.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you, and we'll see you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.